Hello everybody, this is Derek Arden again and welcome to the Monday Night Chat Show. Today I've got a friend of mine, Jill English. In fact, Jill has been on every one of the 77 chat shows we've started since COVID, which was on the 23rd of March. Jill, it's great to know you and have you as a friend now. I didn't know you before. Jill's an expert on neurolinguistics, on psychology. She's been an HR manager. She's working from home on Zoom at the moment. But Jill went on the first ever course in the UK on mental landscapes. So I'm delighted that Jill's going to share a little bit of mental landscapes, how you work your brain, where you store things in your brain with us. So I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Jill English. Usual round of applause for one of our speakers, please. Jill English.
It's a bit premature. You don't know if it's going to be any good or not yet.
Well, I have a feeling this is going to be fantastic.
Okay, so the headline title here is Mental Landscapes. I actually learned about mental landscapes as part of a bigger course on thought pattern management. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a little bit about mental landscapes and what they are. Invite you to explore your mental landscape by giving you some examples of how I organize. That sounds like I do this consciously, how things are organized in my world. Give you a few examples of what happens when things are perhaps not in the optimum place, and then some suggestions about what, how you can actually use this to your own benefit. Now, before I do that, I just want to say one little thing, which is a sort of congratulations and a thank you to Derek, because you've put together, as you say, 77 incredible chat shows with a whole variety of really, really top-class speakers. And that variety is actually really, really interesting. Yet it struck me how many common threads there have been in that whole sequence. I mean, Derek, you've talked about your training in neurolinguistic programming, and you also talked about how things like sensory acuity, noticing body language and the language of the people that you negotiate with has been really, really useful, all out of NLP. We had a great session from Tim Scher talking about hypnosis, and then a fantastic session from Gabrielle Gachet where she talked about the NLP concept of timelines and how anything that you have which has a point in time you can organize in a sort of imaginary line. One option is past, present, future, forward, back to forward, and the other, more frequent, is left to right, past, present, future. When we had a session with Shelley Rose Charvet, we had a mini masterclass. She described how she flips her timeline when she presents to her training audiences and in her speeches, so she can take her audience from where they've been through the grief they're going through now to where they want to go. Now, that works very well if you've got anything which has a point in time. What do you do with the other things which are important in your life? So I'm sitting here in my home. I've got my dining room table behind me. I've got my computer in front of me, and my tea is sitting here next to me on the windowsill. These things, some of them are there all the time, and some of them kind of move around. So you are organizing, and again, organizing sounds like it's a conscious thing, but if I were to say to you, what have I got sitting in my mental landscape? I'm going to back up a little bit because it gives you a chance to use your sensory acuity, although I'm going to spell this out really clearly. Things in my life that are important to me. I've got two sisters. When I think about my sisters, they're here. So they are on my left, slightly above eye level. Now, I have to say, Shelley flips her timeline. I can't do that with this because we're working in 3 dimensions. It's too complicated. So my sisters are here. You can tell by the angle on my arm, they're reasonably close. If I think about my mum and dad, they're over there. Higher up, further over to the left, and I have to say they're also out of my reach because I no longer have my mum and dad. But that's where they are in my thought process. I've got my lovely ex-colleagues just about here. The things I worry about are kind of down here. They're sort of waist level on my right. And one thing that's interesting, my sisters are very, they're clearly there. I have to kind of wobble when I'm down here. I don't know why that is. anything that is really important to me, if I talk about my values, they kind of run right up and down through the middle, kind of in front of my spine. They're absolutely central to who I am. My sense of my health, that sits here firmly in my gut. My timeline, by the way, is backwards to forwards, and future for me is slightly to the right and slightly up. So those are some of the things that I kind of organize in my hypothetical space. Now, why does it matter? Thought pattern management was something which I learned along with Barry, who's also on the call, from Robert Fletcher from Utah. Thought pattern management, organizing mind and body for self-repair. Mental landscapes was a little bit of that. Now, is this for real? Is it true? No, it's a model. Like any model, the value is in the extent to which this is of use to you. So I invite you to kind of explore your mental landscape, some of these examples, and see if they are helpful. Robert used to do a lot of work one-on-one with people in a sort of therapeutic setting, and he came up with some really interesting examples of how where you have things in your life makes a difference. He talked about one of his clients. I don't know why this lady came to talk to him, but she'd always had a battle with her weight. She was quite a large lady. In the process of their conversation, it transpired that she had a lot of guilt and a lot of fear. And when Robert said, "So where is this guilt and fear?" She said, "Well, I can't see it. I don't know." And then she said, "Oh, it's here. I'm sitting in it. It's like I'm in a barrel of this black, sticky, icky stuff. It's like tar, and that's not very nice." So they actually worked on this whole business of fear and guilt and worry, and they got rid of it. And as they got rid of it, the weight started to come in. And Robert postulated that actually, if you're sitting with this toxic stuff really close to you, the only way your body has got of saying, "I don't want this close to what's really important," is to push it away, and to push it away by adding on the pounds. He had another example, and this one is interesting because it ties in with the conversations we had with Kevin O'Connor about the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the 5 or 6, if you will, stages in the transition process. Client came to him, and this was a lady who had a key relationship come to a really unhappy end, and this was actually getting in the way. It happened a while ago, but she was finding that it was right in her face. It was almost as though everything that she did, she couldn't help but look at through the filter of this really unhappy experience. So it was interfering with whatever it was that she did. So his response was, "Well, have you got any friends that you don't see very often? You know, they may be in another town." Yes, I do." "Whereabouts are they?" "Well, they're over there." So he said, "Well, how come if we take this image which is in front of you of this person who, you know, with the unhappy end of the relationship, we take it, we put it over there, and we lock it in place." And suddenly she found that she could actually get on with life and deal with it in a way which was much more productive, because she wasn't seeing it through this constant filter of the grief and the heartache of what had happened, by putting it somewhere else in her mental space. Now, Derek, you've talked about before imagining yourself being wrapped in bubble wrap, protection against you know, things that may be happening. I also remember a story hearing that the Spanish golfer Celiano Ballesteros used to talk about you know, the local, whenever you're in an international golf tournament, people never root for the overseas players. They always root for the home guys. So he'd feel people willing him to miss when he was sort of teeing up for, he was just wanting to putt. So he used to imagine himself in a glass jar that would only let in the good vibes. this is how you can use your mental landscape to create your sense of safety and your sense of well-being, and the imaginary process of putting up whatever it is around you, deciding how big that needs to be, how close you can let that be, is one of the ways in which you can have a direct impact on your, certainly your mental health and possibly your physical health as well.
Jill, I'm just going to chip in there and confirm a couple of things you said. If you could sit a bit closer to the mic, that would be useful, because one or two people can't hear you very well. Now, a lot of what you talk about comes from sports psychology, or it's come from what you were talking about is now in sports psychology. I know a number of football teams have 9 psychologists working with them because they're in the Premier League and they earn a lot of money. And certainly the bubble wrap trick I learned was when people, when you're out with negatrons, negative people who want to give you negativity. Those that follow cricket will know that sledging is what the wicketkeeper does to the batsman, telling him he's going to get out, which has had a lot of stick, but the English team started it and the Australians carry on. It's the same when people take penalties. And if you watch rugby, watch someone like Johnny Wilkinson go into the zone and use his anchor to prevent that. Now, most people are bombarded by negative people who say you won't do that, you can't do that, or you'll never do that. And that's where you need to insulate yourself. Most people don't know about this. And the reason I'm telling everybody else is the more that people like us spread the word and listen to people like you and think about it, the more help we can be to people, because negatrons are everywhere. And what's going on in the world at the moment, which is unprecedented, people do need a lot of help to stop being bombarded by this, if I can use the word, stuff. I'll go back to you now, Jill. I thought it was worth just reinforcing that. And I got a reinforcement on timeline afterwards, if that would help.
So one last thing I was going to say, so those were just a couple of examples of what can happen. There's no right or wrong place to have things in your mental landscape. But there are sometimes places which are unhelpful, and sometimes slightly better places, and you can kind of play with that. Now, let me give you a practical example. I need to do some building work on my house. This has been something I've known for quite a long time, but I hate disruption at home with a passion. And this I've thought of, well, when I thought about it, it was kind of here. It was really in my face. It was big. It was so close to me. You can probably see I can't help, but I'm moving back. It was so close. I couldn't see the edges. I couldn't see the context. I couldn't see the scope. And it just went on the too difficult pile. Something actually triggered, I really have got to get around to doing something about this. I talked to some people, I found a really good book. I worked out that I needed some help from a building surveyor, started to do some things. And now this is here. It's in front of me, it's slightly above eye level, so I can still get on with what I need to do on a daily basis. But this has got a size, I can see around it, I can see where it fits in, I can see the whole thing. So I've got an understanding of what it is I've got to do. And here, this is doable. In fact, the work's going to be starting sometime after Christmas. We're looking at letting contracts at the moment. Did I physically put it there? No, I didn't. It was actually the process of talking, looking at the books, talking to people, finding a building surveyor, which helped move it somewhere where it becomes practical and doable. I only got to write checks. So it's an example of where you can actually, if things perhaps could change a little bit, if things aren't working particularly well, sometimes it's hard to do this stuff by yourself. I certainly know if I'm not feeling very well, I get really quite scared, and I find that I forget what I know how to do. So on those occasions, it can be quite good to find somebody else to talk things through with you. But you can move things around in your mental world. They don't stay in the same place. My tea is not always next to me on the windowsill. But I will say one thing, and I know that my day goes a lot better when I can find my keys and they're in the right place. So that was my whistle-stop tour to mental landscapes. And I hope that's something which you can perhaps do something with.
Brilliant, Jill. Well done. Clap for it. The usual round of applause for Jill. Jill, just a couple of things I'm going to talk about there. That's great. Most of these things come from neurolinguistics, and most sports psychologists are using it all the time now on high achievers, because the difference that makes the difference isn't their fitness or their skills levels. It's what they've got upstairs and how they use it. I was first introduced to this on my NLP training when I wanted to make sure I could use it practically in negotiations, and it came about where people store information in their brain, and the fact that 80% of people store something in the past, up, left, as I'm looking now, right to you, and store things in the future, up, right. So if you store imagination, up, right. So if you want to tell if someone's lying to you in a negotiation or you're coaching someone, you ask them a control question, and then you look and see, when you ask the question you want answered, like where were you on the night of the murder, as the police might say, to see if they look up left or they look up right. Then we moved on to what Jill's been talking about, that we store various memories and information in different places. And this all came about because they discovered in the 70s that the eyes are directly connected to parts of the brain. So you're going to look and imagine where these things are stored. Now, this is particularly helpful if you're having a few issues or you want to be more successful, etc. It's also pretty helpful if you're being sledged in a sports game that you're going to miss a penalty or do something, so you can take all that outside nonsense out. So and it comes really, doesn't it, Jill, from the NLP books, from the CBT books, CBT particularly for people that have got issues, which would be recommended by the National Health Service. NLP wouldn't be. It's probably a bit wacky for that, but it works. And if the sports psychologists are using it, then we should be looking at it. Jill talked about timeline. And the last thing I'm going to say there before I throw it open to questions is that my timeline, that's the past to me, and that's the future. And on my NLP course, a guy called David Shepherd, the trainer, said, I'm going to change your timelines now. People that have got timelines like that are always on time for things. But people who've got timelines back and forward, he said, are always late for things. So he showed us how to change our timeline in your imagination. Remember that. I came back late from the coffee, and he said, well, that shows you that your timeline works, because people that have a timeline like that are always late. They don't care so much about time. Was it right? Don't know. Was it fun? Yes, it was. Did I learn a lot? Yes. Is it interesting? Yeah, sure. It is. And it's being used extensively by coaches, mentors. And the last thing, Jill, is you said that you often can't do these things yourself, because you need someone to remind you, because we forget things that we know, and then we need to be reminded. So great talk, Jill. I'm going to turn the recording off now. Thank you so much for doing that. And that will be on YouTube with your permission, and the podcast. And we will throw the questions open as soon as I've switched the recording off.